We can speak now to lecturer in liberal arts at Queen Mary University of London, Andrew Smith. Thanks for your time, Andrew. Andrew, can I start just by asking you your reaction to all this? I mean, Le Pen, as we're hearing there, and indeed the far right in general, feel that this conviction by the court for corruption is a stab at democracy.
Well, I think one of the first things to remember is that the very foundation of liberal democracy is about the separation of powers, the executive, the legislative and the judiciary. The idea of the independent judiciary is an important part of our democratic toolkit. So right in the heart of it, this is democracy functioning, and this is also the legal system functioning according to the law of the land. I think it's lovely. It's a delusion, in a sense, for the far right to make out that this is personal, that this is political. This, of course, refers to the Sapin 2 law, which came in December 2016, into which this case just falls by around about 20 days, which introduced this automatic exemption from being involved in politics. So this is the function of the law. And while it might be comforting for Marine Le Pen to talk about this as a witch hunt, to deny all of these things, we've seen it happen to other people on the right, on the left. This is important. We could look at what's happened to Nicolas Sarkozy, of course, in the trial just passed. We can see in previous cases like Alain Juppé. This is where, how it works. This is how the system operating actually as it's meant to. It's about punishing crimes that have been committed. She's been found guilty of committing this, mass system of embezzlement, of being right at the head of this. And I think reality, if she wants to look at somebody to blame for this, it's not the courts. It's in fact her late father who instituted this system and which she inherited the kind of being at the head of, as it were. So, yeah, it's a comforting fiction, I think, to talk about a witch hunt.
Indeed, they're definitely going down that line, saying that it is personal, it's a political attack. But a lot of her supporters saying that even if she's convicted, she should still be allowed to run for office and let the electorate decide.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, this is the automatic exemption introduced by the Sapin 2 law. This is part of the sentencing options of the court, and I think it's really important. That's the focus. Now we know, of course, you spoke last night. They are going to attack, counterattack even, and look for every appeal possible. Normally, appeals take about a year to 2 years to hear, so it is still possible that she'll make appeals to all the normal courts. She'll likely get nowhere with those. There'll be some sort of special emergency appeal to the Constitutional Court that might have some kind of success, perhaps. But it would rely on the case essentially being heard again and the judgment quashed for or altered in order for her to be able to run. That would have to happen sort of really next year. So it's a very slim chance, a little mouse hole that she's hoping to scurry down in terms of her legal fortune. But I think it's interesting that, after this happened, we saw that very quickly she stormed out of the courtroom, very quickly, straight back to headquarters. And it seemed really panic stations. There was a certain sort of complacency, it seemed, that had crept in to the far-right national rally at this stage, almost in denial that this could even happen to them. And we saw that in their defence throughout. They simply said, oh, well, we differ on what it means to be a parliamentary assistant. These weren't fictitious jobs. Denying that you've broken the law or that you consider it being important is not really a defence. And actually this now attack of the actual institutions of the law show just how much Marine Le Pen's rhetoric of defending the law and security is really quite hollow. When you can't defend it being applied to yourself evenly, fairly, openly, then I think that's really a sign that this is something quite false rhetoric, misleading rhetoric.
And for so long, the party of the Le Pens was based on we're the clean politicians who aren't stealing and doing all of that. So in the base of this verdict, do you think overall, I mean, there's that side of it, that now her party has been convicted of corruption, but there's also that spin on it that they are being targeted and victims. Overall, do you think the conviction could help or hinder the national rally?
Well, it's an interesting one because, of course, for a long time, the National Rally has been a Le Pen fiefdom, There's always been a Jean-Marie Le Pen and then Marine Le Pen at the head of it. If she were ineligible, then, of course, they will bang that drum about judicial persecution very, very loudly. Now, it would seem that she's got a ready-made replacement in her Dauphin, Jordan Bardella, of course, the young president of the party, who's been so prominent in the last year or so. Now, we heard last night she said she doesn't want to use that asset yet. And of course, she's in denial that she's going to be, pushed aside at all. And actually, that's going to be an interesting thing, because it will, of course, be something that they will continually lean into. It's being persecuted, the people denied, all of this old hogwash that we hear all the time. But instead, it's going to be an interesting way of trying to redeploy that. If Le Pen is not a candidate, then suddenly it says maybe it's Bardella, maybe it's someone else. But the longer the appeal drags on, the longer that moment happens, the less prepared they will be for the presidential elections when they come round in 2027. And likewise, the more space there is for what has previously been a very fractious party. Of course, remember the Bruno Maigret-led split in the 1990s, and the more space for that sort of internal conflict. We know that Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella's camps are slightly different in terms of politics, slightly different in terms of personnel. This may be a moment when the party could actually really reorient itself as well, or come into some difficulties internally. But also have some difficulties in the assembly. Do they continue to attack the government and try to collapse the government? When, of course, if there are new legislative elections, that would very well mean that Marine Le Pen could be exempt from standing in them and so lose her seat in the Assembly. It's a moment, really, I think, about kind of shifting, a foundational shift in the current landscape of politics, because the far right has been undone by the crimes it has committed.
And Andrew, we've been hearing a lot from far-right politicians around the world, in fact, jumping into Marine Le Pen's defence. We've even heard from the US, that there'll be a backlash against it. How much do you think that there is, an international network working together of these far-right parties?
Well, absolutely. I think there is very much a sort of nationalist international that we can see here, of illiberal parties, often far-right parties. It's very telling, of course, that the first public comment that we saw on the sentencing came from the Kremlin, quickly followed by, of course, Viktor Orban, Matteo Salvini in Italy, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. This is really the kind of the grouping, as it were. But there are fractions within that as well. We can see even, Jordan Bardella was meant to speak at a Conservative conference in the United States. Alongside Bannon. Of course, there was the Nazi salute row. Bardella pulled out and was then personally insulted by Bannon. We've seen recently, of course, Bannon has been invited to Israel by the far-right Likud party, and they're engaged in a kind of a network of European far-right parties discussing essentially ideas of nationalism as well. Now, I think there is something that's going on here in terms of a national, international grouping of nationalists, and we can see them connecting all over the place. Of course, let's not forget, a lot of the problems around this whole, embezzlement system to begin with came after the National Rally, then the National Front had actually spent the money it had borrowed from Russia in order to run its campaign back in 2017. So, the constant money worries of the far right, they're, being in hock to other parties elsewhere, it doesn't fill one with confidence for their ability to stand independently and voice a credible political platform. It seems very much like they are relying on other people to fight their battles for them, or perhaps taking their lines from elsewhere. They were certainly, as it's clear, spending the money they were awarded by the European Parliament elsewhere than it should have been spent. So very much this is something where they are running up against the consequences of their action in the normal functioning of the law. And never mind the cacophony we might hear from political allies. This is the legal system functioning as it should.
As it should. Andrew Smith of Queen Mary University of London, thanks indeed for your time.